On July 9, 2002, at 6:00 p.m., the Taos police received a call from concerned neighbors of a 36-year-old woman. They asked for help to solve this monstrous case. Mariora Shend was born in former Yugoslavia but grew up in Sweden. In that country, she was a foreigner and often felt out of place. She had few friends but liked her solitude. She enjoyed spending time alone. She also liked to travel and explore the world. She was open to new experiences. Mariora worked in the Middle East, and later she settled in Bahrain. There, she met an American pilot named Mike Shend. He served at a naval base in Bahrain. The man immediately fell in love with Mariora, and it was no surprise. She was very cheerful, kind, and beautiful. He saw all these qualities in her and thought, where has she been all my life? In 1992, they got married. Soon after the wedding, Mike was transferred from Bahrain to a naval base in Hanford, California, and the newlyweds moved to the United States. But soon their happiness was cut short. Mike began to experience headaches, and he was subsequently diagnosed with a fungal brain infection. At that time, only two such cases were known in the USA. The man underwent surgery, and the fungus was removed, but a side effect of the disease was seizures. His recovery was very slow. This ordeal they went through together brought them even closer. The couple experienced hard times, but a few years later, another tragedy occurred. Mike was in a serious accident and died instantly. He was driving a sports car and collided with a truck. The truck swerved from the oncoming lane. Alcohol was later found in the truck driver's blood. Mike's friend and boss comforted Mariora. When she looked out the door, she knew something had happened. Her husband wasn't home. This was the hardest thing for me in all my years of service. We told her the news, and she was absolutely devastated. Mariora's life changed forever. She was never as calm and peaceful as before. She began to resent her fate, and one could understand her. She was angry because the man she loved and had been through so much with was suddenly and cruelly taken from her. But over time, the anger subsided. Mariora found solace and comfort in her husband as close friend, Michael Edmonds. From the moment they met in California, she knew she could trust him. They were good together, they understood each other, and their interests largely coincided. One thing led to another, and they became inseparable. In the summer of 2002, the couple decided to move to Taos, New Mexico. This town attracted their attention because it was far from places associated with Mariora's painful memories. This was not a betrayal of Mike Shend's memory. On the contrary, his memory always lived in their hearts. But they started a new life together. Sometimes even tragedy turns into something good. Michael and Mariora eagerly awaited their move to their new home, which they had only seen during construction. With great pleasure, they decorated the house, furnished the interiors, tidied the yard, worked in the garden, and enjoyed walks around the town. From the outside, it seemed that Michael and Mariora were an ideal couple, but in reality, they had their difficulties. Mariora could not fully recover after the sudden and tragic death of her husband. In July 2002, after living with Michael for only a few months, Mariora decided to move out. Perhaps they realized that their paths were diverging, and each of them was building their own life, so she decided to move. Mariora rented a small apartment on Church Street, located on the other side of town. The apartment was tiny, just one room with an adjoining bathroom. The kitchen was combined with the living room. Mariora was alone again, but surrounded by friendly neighbors, among whom was her landlord, Edward Duran. Mr. Duran had a grandson, Nathaniel, who helped Mariora carry heavy items into her room. The woman found work at a nearby hotel, but just as she began to recover from the tragedy, something even worse happened. On July 9, 2002, Mariora's neighbors called the Taos emergency service and reported that the woman's car, which lived in their house, had been parked for a long time. They were used to Mariora driving to work every morning. She worked as a cleaner at one of the local hotels. The neighbors asked to check if everything was all right. The county police immediately arrived at the scene to conduct an inspection. On the apartment door, they found traces of blood. When investigators entered, a horrifying scene greeted their eyes. The floor was covered in blood, which was also visible on the walls. It was the scene of a brutal crime. Passing through the kitchen, they immediately found Mrs. Shend's body. She was wearing a light tank top and a white robe. She had stab wounds to her abdomen and neck. Her face was partially covered by her left hand. In addition, detectives noticed signs of self-defense on her hands, wounds from grasping a blade or other sharp object. They immediately imagined the horror she must have experienced in the last moments of her life. The terrible crime scene photos held clues that would later help catch the killer. Detectives noticed blood spatter on the door frames. Given the victim's height and the height of these splatters, they concluded that she was hit in the face at least 3 times right in the doorway. This woman fought for her life. There were clear signs that she tried to lock herself in the bedroom and keep the killer out. At the entrance to the room, in pools of blood, there were sliding marks from her feet as she tried to hold the door. but it was obvious that the killer eventually prevailed. After that, he burst into the bedroom and attacked her, inflicting wounds with a sharp object. He cut and stabbed her many times, splashing blood everywhere. In the bedroom, on the wall near the window, traces of arterial blood were found. Given that the cuts on the victim's neck were on the left side, detectives assumed that when the attacker burst into the bedroom, she began to retreat to the only remaining exit, like an cornered animal. The position of the body indicated a possible motive for the murder. Her legs were spread wide. Anyone who was at the crime scene that day knew that this woman had experienced a true nightmare. Investigators had to find out who could have committed such a monstrous act and for what reason. The crime scene investigation showed that it was not a robbery. Nothing valuable was stolen from the house. The perpetrator's target was specifically Mariora Shend. Forensic experts working at the crime scene managed to find an important clue. Traces leading from the front door to the bedroom were found in the apartment. This was a valuable find for the investigation. The traces could determine the killer's shoe size, as well as the sole pattern, which could identify the type of shoes he was wearing. And when the body was about to be removed, another clue was found. Under Mariora Shend's head, a man's watch was discovered, an important piece of evidence. The question arose, did it belong to the perpetrator or was it there from the beginning? Perhaps it was a watch belonging to one of her friends or acquaintances that fell off during the struggle. But the most important piece of evidence, the murder weapon, was not found by the forensic experts at the scene. The watch, the lack of forced entry, and the shoe prints were a good set of clues. Sometimes, seemingly insignificant details become crucial for an investigation. So, first, detectives went to talk to the neighbors. One of the first to answer questions was the 17-year-old grandson of the landlord, Nathaniel Duran, who lived in the neighboring apartment. He was asked if he knew Mariora Shend and if he heard what happened. He replied that he didn't hear anything, and he only met the woman once. He also said that he had only been in the apartment before her arrival, when he was helping his grandfather prepare everything. Nevertheless, he told the police something interesting. He advised them to question his friend, Mitchell Rhodes. Rhodes was 19 years old and lived only a mile away from Mariora's house. He had already been arrested for minor offenses. Nathaniel said that Rhodes had been acting strangely and suspiciously lately. The guy added that he might know something. In the hope of getting an eyewitness account, investigators decided to talk to Rhodes and record the conversation. They asked him where he was on the night of the murder, but earlier you said you saw him at a party. When was that? Friday or Saturday? It was Saturday. Friday, hard to say. I don't remember. I am bad with dates. Clearly, he named dates but then changed them. He gave locations where he could not have been. He said he couldn't remember the exact date or time. The police were especially suspicious of the explanation he gave for his inability to remember the time during the interrogation. When detectives asked him to clarify the time or date, he replied that his watch was broken. I see you have a watch, but it has too big for you. It is fashionable now. My grandmother gave it to me. This led detectives to suspect that the watch found next to Mariora's body belonged to him, and in general, his testimony made him a suspect in the woman's murder. Mitchell agreed to provide samples for DNA analysis. However, before they could be sent to the lab, another call came into the emergency services. Detectives were informed of another horrific murder of a young woman, which by all indications resembled Mariora Shend's case. The crimes were almost identical. Both women were unmarried, lived alone. The injuries were similar, and in both cases, rape occurred. Detectives immediately suspected that they were dealing with a serial killer and rapist. The situation was already serious, and now the clouds were even thicker. They ray filming us, we ray going to be movie stars, my big screen debut. Now the police had to investigate another murder that occurred near Mariora's house. The victim was 22-year-old Leon Martinez. The murders were very similar. Then detectives thought that it was done by one and the same person. When you allow information about Mariora's case to be released to the media, you immediately deal with a mess of sources that can lead the investigation down a false path. Detectives had to make a difficult choice. Should they inform the public that a serial killer might be operating in the city and thus cause panic among residents? Or, conversely, warn people and urge them to be extremely careful? In the circumstances, it was more important to warn the public. Tension was building, everyone was very alarmed, and then the police received a tip that changed the course of the investigation into Mariora Shend's case. Colleagues said that lately she had not been getting along with her ex-boyfriend, Michael Edmonds. They had problems. Mariora had argued so fiercely with Michael that she left him and moved out. That is how she ended up in that apartment. Given the brutality of this murder, it could well have been a crime of passion, and then Michael Edmonds became a suspect. Detectives needed to question him. After obtaining a search warrant, police went to Michael Edmonds' house. They carefully watched him while they searched his house. If he needed to use the restroom, police escorted him. Detectives tried to find a connection between the evidence found at the crime scene and the items in Mr. Edmund's house. For example, they looked for a receipt for the purchase of the watch or the box, since watches are usually sold in boxes. They also looked at photographs and joint pictures, hoping to find a photo of Edmunds wearing the watch. In addition, detectives inspected his shoes and checked if the sole pattern matched the impression found at the crime scene. Police removed several boxes from Edmund's house, but that wasn't all. After the search, the sheriff and one of the detectives asked him several questions, including the main question about his whereabouts on the day of the murder. The man replied that he was home alone, and